I'm Mike Belsito, co-founder of eFuneral, and I wanted to take a few minutes to tell the story of how eFuneral actually got started. It wasn't very long ago. In fact, really the wheels started to go into motion about a year and a half ago. And at that point in time, what happened is my cousin died. And he had been in a situation where his health wasn't great, but we definitely weren't expecting him to die so suddenly. And it was something that my family wasn't prepared for at all. We knew that we wanted to have the funeral service near where he lived, but we didn't necessarily know which specific funeral home to work with. And at that point in time, there's about 12 funeral homes within just a few miles of where he lived. So the question for us wasn't, where is there a funeral home? I mean, we know where all the funeral homes are. There's so many of them in that specific area. But the question was, how do we know which one to work with? You know, which one is better than the other? What kind of service quality would we expect with each funeral home? What prices do they actually charge us? These were the questions that we were trying to answer at the time. And I remember that my dad turned to me, kind of being one of the more, tech-forward people in my family, to say, hey, is there anything online that can help us get information that we need to make an informed decision about where we want to have this funeral service at? And I thought it was a great question. I assumed that there was. I assumed that there were resources online, more than just simple directories. I assumed that there was a place that you can go to get information on service quality, get information on what pricing you might expect. And what I found out was there weren't a whole lot of great resources out there. So my family essentially ended up just moving forward with a funeral service, and the service we received was fine, but we didn't really know going into the process what to expect. Now remember being at dinner with my wife not long after the actual funeral service took place, and the only reason we were at that particular restaurant that we were at was because I had read so many great reviews for it online. And I remember thinking to myself, how does this make sense that something as inconsequential as dinner, we actually had more information to use to make our decision on where to go than for something that's so important like a funeral service? And so that's when I personally decided this was something I absolutely had to look into. Why wasn't there a solution for this big problem that I found? I started to talk about it with, at the time it was a friend of mine. His name's Bryan Chaikin. He's now my co-founder, and together we run eFuneral. But at the time, we both were working with each other at a technology company, and when I brought up this big problem, it resonated with him based on his experiences and his family's experiences. So we decided to look into why this problem existed and whether or not we could come up with any potential solutions to this big problem of not having information to make an informed decision about which funeral provider to work with. So we spent many early mornings, many late nights, many lunches really trying to dig in, really trying to learn more about the funeral profession, because this was something that we aren't funeral directors. We didn't come from the funeral profession itself, so we needed to learn. But what we did come from, our backgrounds, was problem solving, specifically in startup technology businesses. We knew how to use technology to solve problems. So our big question was, can we use technology to solve this big problem that we've uncovered? And after a few months of really looking into it, we decided there was this big gap. At this point, we also started to talk to funeral directors, and we learned that funeral directors struggle to connect with families that are undecided, and they're using traditional means of advertising, but there are definitely more forward-thinking things that funeral directors could be doing to connect with these families. So at that point in time, we learned about a startup accelerator program called the 10 Accelerator that the state of Ohio put together, where they were looking for 10 startup companies with ideas, and hopefully those people could execute against those ideas. And this program was meant to get those companies up and running. So basically, last June in 2011, Bryan and I quit our full-time jobs after we were offered a spot in the inaugural 10 Accelerator class. June 13th, we started up in that class, completed the program in September of 2011, and in Columbus, Ohio, actually, and that's when we moved back to Cleveland, Ohio, to open up the office of eFuneral, and really it was February 7th when we first launched into our initial market, which was Northeast Ohio. And now, of course, we're expanding to all sorts of areas. We now have over 150 funeral homes in our network. We've had inquiries from all over the country. Funeral homes from all over the country are inquiring about when we expand. And we're at that point now. We're really looking to expand. So, but I wanted to share the story of how eFuneral really got started, because it is, I think, interesting, only because, especially somebody that didn't come from the funeral profession, you know, how did somebody like that actually go ahead and start a business like eFuneral? So for Bryan and I, that's the story. That's really how things got started. And certainly I'm sure from time to time we'll do videos to give you even more perspective on how our business is progressing. But for now, we hope that you found that interesting. So for more videos, feel free to visit our YouTube channel anytime you want at youtube.com/efuneralresources. You could also visit eFuneral.com's resource center at eFuneral.com/resources for articles, videos, things like that on topics related to funeral planning.